today.
So what do you make of this, what the process is going to be if the DA calls for resentencing, which we hear he is going to do? What happens next? How long are we talking about here? Is this going to drag on for another few months?
Well, the judge, William Ryan, has to schedule a hearing within 30 days. So this is going to move pretty quickly. And obviously, the timing of all this matters a lot with respect to the election. So assuming that George Gascon recommends time served, Judge Ryan can do one of a few things. He can reject it outright because the brothers pose an unreasonable risk of danger to the public. Then the parties can appeal, but obviously that may push this whole thing out until the Nathan Hochman era. The judge can agree to the recommendation, in which case, as soon as the California Department of Corrections processes the brothers, they'll be out. So they may be out before Thanksgiving. The third possibility is that the judge says, you know what, I'm going to resentence the brothers, but not to time served, but maybe something like 25 to life, which most murderers get absent special circumstances, or 50 to life because there were two victims. In that case, once the brothers serve their time, they'll be eligible for parole, but they'll have to go before the parole board like any other criminal defendant. And of course, Gavin Newsom can reject that recommendation. So those are the three possibilities here.
Okay, and the third one sounds like it could be extremely complicated. Let me ask you this, because it's a question that we've been asking in the newsroom. Suppose this does stretch out past the election and past the time when perhaps George Gascon is no longer, if you believe the polls, the DA, and Nathan Hochman becomes the DA. If he so chooses, can he reverse whatever it is that George Gascon is about to announce?
So potentially, yes. That's why the timing is so critical. Obviously, we all know about the November 5th election. Hochman wouldn't be sworn in until December 2nd. So there's not really anything he can do until then. So the question is, does that hearing, which has to happen within 30 days, does it happen before December 2nd? And if the brothers are released, it's too late for Hochman to do anything. Now, of course, if it happens after December 2nd, he can step in and say, you know what, I don't agree with this resentencing. And of course, Mark Garagos, the lawyer for the brothers, is certainly going to appeal and litigate the issue, but it's going to be an absolute mess if Nathan Hochman, who I used to work with when I was with the city of LA, disagrees with George Gascon's recommendation, and the timing doesn't work out for this hearing to happen before he takes office.
And by the way, I mentioned before on the air, we are planning to talk with Nathan Hochman today here live at about 3:15, so perhaps we'll then know what his thinking is. But that leads me to this question. You mentioned three possibilities. Is there a fourth possibility that this could get delayed also because the judge might say, you know what, we just had an election, let's say hypothetically, Hochman wins. I want to hear what the incoming district attorney has to say about this.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, there's still a pending habeas petition. We're talking about resentencing in the interest of justice, but last May, the brothers' attorneys filed that petition alleging a constitutional error. I'm happy to talk about it, but no question, the judge may want to avoid a messy situation where a new district attorney is going to take a different position with respect to resentencing and have to potentially start this whole thing over or deal with litigation in the Court of Appeals. So absolutely. That's definitely a fourth possibility.
So we have four different ways that this could go.
I'm losing track. All right, so if all...
Well, I mean, you're talking about politics.
All right, just stand by. I'm just listening here in my circuit. If the DA is getting ready to speak, it does not appear he's ready just yet. So, Neama, what were you saying?
Well, I mean, you're talking about politics at play here, right? This is in the middle of an election season. Let's be honest. District Attorney George Gascon has had this new evidence since May of last year. And why is he taking this step so close to an election? I mean, he's saying it's not politics, but there has to be politics at play here.
I was going to say, you obviously don't believe him.
No, I don't. I mean, every prosecutor in this country is elected or appointed by someone who is. And I prosecute a case at the federal level, city level. This just reeks of politics. Look, and it may be the right outcome for Lyle and Eric. I'm not saying it's not, but the timing of all this, the Netflix documentary, the Kardashians, Rosie O'Donnell's, everyone's supporting the brothers. It's great for them. It's the perfect storm of PR and politics, and they may get out as a result.
Since again we've been going down this hypothetical road, let's continue that journey for another few minutes. Um, when it comes to the let's say Nathan Hochman, has he painted himself into a corner in that he's presenting himself as the sort of law and order, the firmer law and order candidate than the progressive George Gascon? But on the other hand, since it's been made public that the DA's office had been considering a resentencing proposition for the Menendez brothers, there's been a lot of sympathy for the two brothers. Some people not, but a lot of people have become sympathetic. So does he have to walk a very fine line in deciding what he wants to do as an incoming DA should this extend into his tenure?
I think that's right. I mean, whether it's social media, TikTok, or even traditional media, there's overwhelming support for the brothers being released, which, as someone who's lived in Southern California my entire life, if you asked me 5, 10 years ago, it would be unfathomable. But it really just goes to show the power of a Netflix series. I mean, there is so much sympathy for the brothers. And of course, Nathan Hochman, who's been painting George Gascon as soft on crime, and rightfully so, in my opinion, he needs to really walk a fine line here. He doesn't want to alienate people who are supporters of this resentencing and their release, but at the same time, he does want to appear to be strict when it comes to these types of cases and not give murderers, double murderers, a free pass.
A lot of this hinges on the sexual abuse aspect of it, because I believe that at some point one of the prosecutors had said something to the effect of, well, young men can't be raped. Of course, we know that was never and is not true now, not true then. Men can be raped just as women can be raped. And so that would have factored in if the case had happened, say, later on when we were more aware of sexual abuse, that the brothers would have gotten a much lesser sentence than they received. But again, that all hinges on if you believe the sexual abuse allegations. There are a sizable number of people who do not believe that allegation. They believe that the Menendez brothers made that up to justify. There is pushback on one of these letters being a hoax. Do you think that could factor in? Well, obviously it will. How much credence do you think a judge will give this supposed evidence if someone says they will present to DA George Gascon that the letter was a hoax?
Here's the challenge. And, I believe victims of sex abuse, and I believe that the brothers were abused. But setting that aside, it's not a legal defense here. It's not a license to kill. And we've talked about manslaughter. So let's just look at the law. Under California law in any state, to use deadly force, you have to be at imminent risk of death or serious bodily injury, period. If that belief is reasonable, it is a license to kill. If the belief is unreasonable, but you genuinely in your heart of hearts believe that someone's going to kill you or use force that's substantial bodily injury, you can use deadly force. And that reduces murder to manslaughter. So that's the difference between perfect self-defense when the belief is reasonable and imperfect self-defense when the belief is unreasonable. Imperfect self-defense reduces murder to manslaughter. But the problem is this. Shooting your parents in the back of the head while they're eating ice cream and watching TV is not self-defense under any circumstance. And even if you believe that Lyle and Eric genuinely but unreasonably believe that their father, Jose, would kill them if they outed him, how does that apply to Kitty? It's just not a self-defense case. And that's why the habeas petition is so weak here.
So it's not a cut and dried issue. We are speaking with attorney and former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani as we wait for DA George Gascon to begin his news conference.
And I would imagine that some of these issues that you've just raised would be ones that one would expect a judge to raise as well?
Of course. I think William Ryan, the challenge he's going to have in ruling on this habeas petition, if we even get there, right? It may just be a justice issue. But if you're ruling on this habeas petition, let's say the second trial judge made an error. The sex abuse should have come in. How does that make this a self-defense case, a deadly force case? It doesn't. And the problem is this, it's not just a constitutional error. That is not enough. There has to be prejudice in a habeas petition. That means the result of the trial would have been different. And I don't think from a legal perspective, the brothers can credibly argue that they had the right to use self-defense in this case. I understand that they were victims of sex abuse and what happened to them is terrible. But we can't have vigilante justice in this country. And that's why their actions do not squarely fit within the four corners of self-defense law, whether it's perfect or imperfect. That's why I don't think the results of the trial would have been different.
So let me then box you into a corner. What do you think would be a fair outcome?
I think the just result is for the brothers to be released. They've served 35 years. I do believe that they were victimized by their parents. It's just a justice argument. It's not a legal one whatsoever. So I agree that the resentence is appropriate. I've been very critical of George Gascon and how he's handled different cases, but I think this is the right outcome for the brothers. There are people who have served 25 years for committing murders. They have been paroled. They have gotten a second chance, and I think Lyle and Eric should as well.
So now let me switch from the justice question to the political one. Does this then help George Gascon?
Oh, it absolutely helps him, and is probably the reason he's doing it. Again, it reeks of politics, but, it's just the political reality of the world that we live in. He's doing this for political reasons right before an election. If it's something he truly cared about, why didn't he do it a year ago?
You appear to be suggesting that a politician would do something for political reasons, and I don't know if I can stomach that, sir.
Yeah. Well, before this resentencing, I thought there was a real possibility that Gavin Newsom steps in and he commutes their sentence or pardons them. I mean, that's how popular the Menendez brothers are right now. I mean, it's just, if you have folks that are listening right now, I'm telling you, the vast majority of them agree that they should be released.
Would that have been a, for lack of a better way of putting it, a cleaner way to deal with this, to have the governor do that? Although I can think of many political reasons why he both would or wouldn't want to.
I think so. I think that would be within the confines of the law, the right way to handle it, because obviously they're murderers. They don't have a self-defense argument. But, if they were indeed abused by their parents, obviously a lot has changed with sex abuse over the decades that since this happened. There's a lot more awareness. I mean, at the time, the brothers, there was a possibility that they would be executed, right? This was a death penalty case, let's not forget. So obviously, the case would have been handled very differently. Right now, I think they would have gotten an offer, whether it was a manslaughter or a 25 to life offer, if this murder happened today.
You are listening to KNX FM and HD Los Angeles. I'm Rob Archer, along with Charles Feldman. We're on the line with Neama Rahmani, attorney, former federal prosecutor, waiting for L.A. County DA George Gascon to begin his news conference. And Charles, I was telling you, as this was scheduled for 1:30, I was telling you, and now I regret telling you this, that my feeling was that Mr. Gascon would be relatively on time here. Here we are. Some 27 minutes later, and he has not begun yet.
Well, if I had a couple of $1,000 for each time any DA's press conference was late, I would be in Switzerland right now.
So I feel rather the fool for thinking that he was going to begin on time. Neama Rahmani, thank you for talking with us today about this issue, the Menendez brothers, and are they going to be resentenced? Is there a possibility, let's say that the judge rules resentencing, sentences them to time served, they get released. Is there a possibility, as we have seen in other cases where the criminal case is dismissed, but then other family members or someone else decides to make a civil case out of it? Is that a possibility here?
It's not, because there's a 2-year statute of limitations for those types of lawsuits in California. So that statute was long run. If the brothers are released, their problems are over, civil and criminal. There's no real son of Sam laws in California anymore, so I wouldn't be surprised if you see him on some type of reality show in 2025.
Let me also quickly ask you, because usually in law, right, things are based on precedent. This is a very unique kind of case, of course, but can you think of anything that's similar under California law, any similar cases where we know the outcome that might somehow point in the direction of where this is going?
I cannot and do not. I mean, they shot their father 6 times, their mother 10 times. It's a clear case of first degree premeditated murder, special circumstances. I've not ever seen a case like this. That's why it's just garnering so much attention right now.
And that was the feeling, I think, when the brothers were convicted back then. As you pointed out, the circumstances of the shooting itself kind of ruled out in a lot of people's minds self-defense, also shooting the mother when apparently she was not any kind of threat to them. But then the other case has been made that there were some mental issues going on here, too. The brothers had been so abused that they weren't thinking clearly or rationally in this case at all. What do you make of that aspect?
Well, like, obviously, as victims of abuse, that's a mitigation argument, not a legal defense. That's something that would come into play in a sentencing phase, obviously in the death penalty phase. It's a mitigating factor. But again, it's not, a battered spouse syndrome. There's nothing under the law that the brothers can point to that would allow them to act the way they did under the circumstances. And look, we've seen it. Gypsy Rose, killed her mother, got a lot of attention. We've seen a lot of cases recently where the abused are standing up to their abusers and sometimes even killing them. Now, again, it's maybe a factor that is considered as sentencing for mitigation, but it's not a legal defense, and they're two very different things.
Do you think if this case were happening anywhere other than in sort of the media capital of the United States, it would get this interest?
I think that Netflix has just a big reason, right? We've seen it time and time again. R. Kelly, surviving R. Kelly, it just changes the case, the trajectory of a legal case. Britney Spears and her documentaries changed her conservatorship. Recently, Keith Jeffries, Abercrombie and Finch, right? That was a BBC documentary. So these types of docuseries, TV shows, they really, really can affect a legal case. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. If it weren't for monsters, we probably would not be having this conversation.
So have we come to the point in this country where if you are convicted of a serious crime, rather than hiring good lawyers, you want to make sure you get yourself a Netflix series?
There's a whole battle both inside the courtroom and outside, and the court of public opinion really matters. And, the defense, in this case, they've done a masterful job on the public relations sides of things.
All right, Neama Rahmani, thank you so much for joining us today as we wait for LA County DA George Gascon to begin his news conference. We assume, based on some other reporting, that we